This is True Crime Arizona, an Arizona's Family Originals podcast.
Hi everyone, Briana Whitney here, host of the True Crime Arizona podcast. We had a lot of people listening to the last episode we released on the hunt for the killer of Lauren Heike. She was a 29-year-old woman who worked at a Scottsdale golf club. She lived in North Phoenix. She was out hiking 1 week ago, last Friday, when she was killed and attacked on the trail. Completely heinous crime. And the last time we left you guys, we had a press conference with police and Lauren Heike's family and her good friend. And they basically were making a plea to the public, please come forward with any information you have. All that they had out at the time was a grainy surveillance video of the person that they believe was the suspect running away from the scene. Now, that person has been arrested, 22-year-old Zion Teasley. And I have David Caltabiano here with me. He's a reporter at our station. David, you've been working on this case today, kind of going through some of the same court documents that I did. He has previous criminal history, but where I want to start is with what we learned in the court documents from his arrest and how and why police had probable cause to arrest him for the murder of Lauren Heike. So I'm just going to go through some of the main points we learned. You know, one thing to mention, we don't normally get this much information and timeline details from Phoenix police on cases. I mean, this is really detailed in how they led to Zion. So I'm going to go through, and here's what we know, and then David and I are going to break down, some of the things we've learned on the analysis side of things from attorneys, FBI agents, police, things like that. So. And we do want to warn you that these details are pretty disturbing. So listener discretion is advised with this. We now know that Lauren Heike was stabbed 15 times while on the Reach 11 trail in North Phoenix. Investigators believe she was chased through or over a barbed wire fence. They found blood droplets and some of her personal belongings along the path of the trail that led up to where her body was found. She had multiple puncture wounds on her back and her chest. The deepest wound was 3 inches deep, and it appeared that she had defensive wounds on her hands and arms from fighting back. At the time, there was no weapon found at the scene, so police officers started surveying the area, trying to figure out who had surveillance cameras, who might have had Ring doorbell cameras. Did this show anything with Lauren and this person? And they found quite a bit of video. So different surveillance cameras show Lauren Heike and the suspect, Zion Teasley, both walking toward the Reach 11 trail Friday morning. Teasley was only a couple minutes behind Lauren, and she was not followed by anybody else on this trail based on camera footage. At about 10:53 a.m., Lauren walked out of camera view and was last seen walking toward the area where her body was found. Then minutes later, Teasley is seen on camera sprinting away from that area. Ultimately, DNA from Lauren's shoe that was left at the scene matched Teasley's DNA, and that was one of the main reasons that led officers to arrest him. Now, Teasley was on probation from other crimes. He had just served in prison. He was let out in November of last year, 2022. But maybe more importantly, he was recently fired from his job at a store for being aggressive toward female coworkers and suspected of stealing merchandise. His managers told police that Teasley routinely carried a pocket knife, and police believe that was the murder weapon. Now, in the police interview after Teasley was arrested, he told officers he struggles with his sexuality and is, quote, concerned about the salvation of his soul due to his thoughts. Teasley confirmed it was him in the surveillance video running, but said he only recognized Lauren from the news of her attack and, quote, wanted to look like her. He told police he is not a person who plans to kill another person, and when they asked if he knew why officers were there, he told them it couldn't possibly be for sexual assault. Teasley is now on a $1 million cash-only bond. David, I know that was a lot of information, and it's extremely disturbing. From everything we can tell, this seems random. Police believe at the moment it is random, but they are still going through phone records and internet searches and everything like that. What's your biggest takeaway from what we just went through?
Listening to the police press conference today, what really stuck out was the fact that she ran and she fought back.
Yeah.
And she succumbed to her wounds. She ran away from him. She tried to get away. She even went through a barbed wire fence. Obviously, first and foremost, your thoughts and prayers go out to Lauren Heike's family. We have so many people, especially here in Arizona, that go to the trails to have a sense of peace, a sense of alone time, to just be one with nature. And this is a lot of people's fear, is that they could just be ran down and attacked and ambushed. And we knew when this case happened and more details were coming out. We heard a lot behind the scenes of what could have possibly happened. And unfortunately, learning through these court paperworks that a lot of our suspicions that she was stabbed, she was followed, and again, she was ambushed. But what really stuck out to me was police saying that, she was a fighter and she did everything she could to get away from who police now believe is Zion Teasley, the individual who they believe was holding a knife and was stalking her until that attack.
And something that has stuck out to everybody, right? These quotes that he gave police, that he wanted to look like her. I mean, that is eerie. And what do you take away from that? And the fact that he said he was struggling with his sexuality and that he couldn't possibly be being arrested for sexual assault. Very strange, because when you look at this from the outside, you might think, Lauren is a beautiful girl. Maybe he had some sort of sexual attraction to her. But in this case, it almost seems that he was envious of her life. I talked to two former FBI special agents who are basically going through the court documents with me today, weighing in on each part of this. And both of them weighed in on those comments. And one of them said, just because sexual assault didn't occur doesn't mean there's not a sexual nature to this crime. And I want to play for you what they had to say about that part.
But it sounds like she had something he wanted and did not have, and that was not sex or sexual in nature. It could have been she was a very beautiful young woman, and maybe that's what he wanted to be or wished he was, and he was repressing those feelings, and it expressed itself violently. The pathway to violence begins with a grievance, some type of grievance, something set towards either a person or a group of people. And for this individual, it may have simply been women. So he talks about being raised a Christian and being very, I don't know if we use the term guilty, but being worried about his desires, potentially sexual desires and sexual thoughts. Well, that shows a lot of guilt and a lot of repression that he's willing to come out and tell a detective right away in this. You couple that repression with the statements of him being aggressive towards women, and then later him saying that he wanted to look a lot like this victim. All that is concerning. His anger was likely directed to women in general, but really, unfortunately, to this victim because probably he recognized how attractive she was. She had things he did not have.
The fact that he said he wanted to look like Lauren, that's just an odd statement by itself. So there's something going on, obviously, in his mindset that connects him to this crime, that drove him to commit this crime, I believe. Again, his statements about wanting to look like her, and his statement about, well, this was definitely not sexually motivated, or words to that effect. That's obviously what's in the front of his mind. There's often a high degree of personal rage, and that doesn't necessarily mean that there's a direct connection between the assailant and the victim, but in the assailant's mind, they are taking out their rage on that victim at that time. So even though they may have never met, for whatever reason, he noticed Lauren. She may have been a victim of opportunity, and he took out his rage on her. Overkill is a term that's sometimes used. These are horrible things to talk about, but it wasn't necessary to stab her 15 times to kill her. That's rage. That's just very personal rage. A stabbing is a very up-close, personal crime that requires physical contact and a lot of physical exertion to do that. But the fact that he said he wanted to look like her, to me it seems more of a possible jealousy situation. There seems to be a big disconnect between what he did and what his thoughts about it were.
And that audio from former FBI special agents Jim Eggleston and Lance Lysing. Very interesting analysis on that side of things, and definitely a disturbing nature to it all. Now, this was not the first time Zion Teasley was arrested. And we had said on our newscast last night, when we had confirmation from sources that DNA connected him to the scene, the fact that Phoenix police was able to come back and match that to him so quickly could only mean one thing. His DNA was already in the system, in the CODIS database with Phoenix police, because he had already been in prison for felony charges before. And we were correct. David, I know today you've been going through a lot of his old charges and what he was in prison for. Can you take us through when those occurred, what they were, and then how long he was in prison for?
So his life really took a turn when he was 20. He was implicated in a bunch of robberies that happened in North Phoenix. It's hard to say that he had a wide-ranging criminal history. It's really it comes down to May 2020 to July 2020. And what started happening at these two specific Circle Ks in North Phoenix, they were getting a man coming in, demanding that clerks put money onto a Google Play card. And this happened 6 times. And on the last time, police say that Zion Teasley used a gun and flashed it to the coworker who they ended up starting to recognize him because he kept coming over and over and over again. And on that very last time, the 6th time, police actually caught up to him and arrested Zion Teasley. And he admitted to each and every case. And what's interesting is in one of these instances, in the very first instance, he said, "I'm sorry, I just needed the money." But it was a habitual crime. It was the same 2 locations. He was going back and forth. And of course, anytime like this, a serious murder happens, we always want to trace back and look at the person who's arrested and say, hey, something could have happened that could have prevented this? Is there something in this history that could have pointed to this? And it's hard to say in this case because he didn't have a very violent past. And again, these robberies started in May 2020, go into July, and he used a weapon on one of those occasions.
Right. They were much less than murder, for sure. And he ended up taking a plea deal, correct?
He ended up taking a plea. He was initially charged with 13 felonies. He took a plea deal for 3, and he served in total 2.5 years behind bars. It was released in November. And, the current county attorney, the prosecutor, they're no longer in office, but I tried talking to some legal experts to understand, because we know that prosecutors use plea deals as a tool, right, to avoid trial, to make sure that justice is met. And they said, you know what, on the outside, you look at these 13 charges, one of them is kidnapping, another is robbery, armed robbery. And from the outside, it looks like that could have been a signal for worse things to come. But when you read the court paperwork, in each of these robberies, except for one, he goes in and he demands the clerk to put money on these Google Play gift cards. And then he takes the gift cards and on one occasion, he took tobacco and left. And again, on the very last occasion, he flashed a gun and then ran away. And that's when he got arrested. And he admitted to every single one of those crimes, and he even made a statement to police. He said he pulled up a YouTube video before his robberies to learn how to handle a gun.
And that, interesting, he made that statement to police too. But clearly he didn't have a lot of experience with guns, or at least was trying to make that look as if that was the case to police. I asked the FBI agents about this because very clearly there was immense escalation from what he was committing crimes as to now what he did to Lauren. And I asked them, was there any way to prevent this? Because in these court documents, it said that he had a risk assessment of medium to low to re-offend, but that was based off of the robberies. That was not based off of anything that had to do with anything sexual or murder, violence of that nature. And so I talked to them about this. How do you criminally profile somebody who goes from escalating from that kind of crime up to here? And how do you how do you work with that? Is there a way to prevent that? And so I want you to listen to what these FBI special agents had to say on that.
Well, there seems to be a disconnect between his previous criminal activity and then escalating to this type of a homicide. In the past, he escalated from kind of a strong-armed robbery. He may have been armed with a screwdriver during one of those incidents. Then he escalated to using a handgun and even went back repeatedly to the same store, which is pretty brazen. That's odd behavior in itself. But the fact that he may have been fired recently before this happened, that's a stress event. That's a stressor in his life, which could have escalated this behavior.
And you asked, what could we have done? He got 3 years there, but didn't serve anywhere near that. He was released pretty quickly. Could have served his time. And that 3 years was even below the presumed amount for the offenses that he pled to, even after some of those offenses were dismissed in a plea bargain. So hindsight is 20/20, but you look at this carefully, and he served very little time for some serious violent offenses in the past, and likely should have been in jail longer than he was. This would have been a high probability of reoffending. There was no sign of remorse in any aspect of that crime or in the interview afterwards. He likely would have offended again.
The whole situation is just pretty unimaginable. It's terrifying. Even if they somehow had any sort of connection online or if he had seen her places, and either way, there's nothing about this that's settling in any sort of aspect. And you can only imagine Lauren's fear in that moment. The fact that she did fight back shows that she was strong. She was not going to just take this. And I think that speaks volumes. Zion was arrested at his mom's apartment that he also lived at in North Scottsdale. David, what do we find about the mom that we got confirmed today, and how does that play an interesting role in this?
We already spoke about Zion, the fact that he had a probation officer, and we forgot to mention this, the fact that he saw that probation officer
yes.
after the murder had occurred. So we have so many questions about what that probation officer could have learned from Zion. Did that probation officer know that he lost his job, that he was being allegedly aggressive towards women? Unfortunately, those notes and details are confidential under Arizona state law, so we don't get that information. But we did learn that Zion's mother is currently employed with the Maricopa County Adult Probation Department. She is a surveillance officer, a very well-known surveillance officer at that. And just in today's press conference, police confirmed it is her right, but she refused to talk to detectives about this case. So it is a twist. A lot of people are asking the question, could he have been getting preferential treatment? And that is something that we're trying to ask questions about, trying to see if she had any role in how her son was handled in the system.
Right. And we also don't know, at this point, his mother is not facing any charges. But police have said they are still investigating multiple avenues here. He was living there where they lived, very close to the crime scene. He told officers that he had seen Lauren on the news and knew of the attack. So were they watching the news together? Did they see that video of him together? We just don't know her involvement. But that was definitely, I would say, a little bit of a shocking piece of information to everybody when that came out, because you're thinking, if she's somebody who is serving as making sure people follow the law, and this is what is happening with her son, it's just, it doesn't go together. It doesn't add up. So that was an interesting piece of this as well. So we are still gathering more information. As police have said, they do believe at this point that it is likely a random attack, but they wouldn't concretely say that today. And they said they are still looking through other forensics and evidence, which likely is a lot of digital evidence. Her cell phone. I talked to a detective yesterday who said her cell phone's going to be invaluable in this, whether there's messages, anything social media related, websites, and then also maybe his history on his personal devices as well. Had he seen her on social media? Any of that will also play a role too. And those are answers that we hopefully will get in the coming days and weeks as this investigation goes on. But definitely a lot of new details today as we learned about Zion Teasley, his criminal history, and what gave police probable cause to arrest him in the murder of Lauren Heike. I want to thank everybody who's been with us and who listens to True Crime Arizona. We are going to have more on the zombie hunter trial. I know we're in the middle of that, but we needed to get these updates out there. And of course, first and foremost, our hearts at this station are with Lauren Heike's family and her friends. This is an unimaginable crime, and it's hard for us to report on, but we can't even begin to understand or feel what her family and friends are going through. So please say a prayer for the Heike family, and thank you again for listening. Any new information, you can stay here with True Crime Arizona and also catch all the latest on azfamily.com and on our newscasts on Channel 3 and CBS 5. Thanks, guys. True Crime Arizona, the podcast, is hosted by me, Briana Whitney, and produced by Sergio Hernandez. It's a production of Arizona's Family, 3TV, CBS 5, and azfamily.com in Phoenix, Arizona.
This is True Crime Arizona, an Arizona's Family Originals podcast.